Hi, Kathy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're about ready to get started. I'm going to defer to Lindsay or to Mary Ann to give me a nod if we are ready to go.
I think the session starts at 1:45 was the published time. So if you wouldn't mind waiting just another couple minutes as people join. I have 1:41 on my clock right now.
Lindsay, I can't hear you. Patty, let me just check with you. Can you hear me speaking? Okay, good. Okay, so I'm just having a little bit of trouble hearing Lindsay.
Can you hear me now?
I think she has indicated that we need to wait just one moment.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Oh, technical difficulties. Okay. I am not sure if Kathy can hear me.
So I am not hearing for some reason, but I don't know that that is necessary. If the rest of you can hear Lindsay and you can hear me, we'll just let Lindsay do whatever she needs to do to get us started, and then I'll be ready to go.
Okay, I have adjusted my microphone controls, possibly, so I think I'm getting some feedback. People are hearing both myself and Kathy. Kathy, I don't know that she can hear anyone on that on the back end. Okay, I'm getting comments. Yes, people can hear us. Okay, I will introduce our speaker today. My name is Lindsay Novacek. I am the chair of the nursing section of the North Carolina Association. It is my honor today to welcome Kathy Dale. Kathy Dale is the Director of Community Health Assessment, Health Improvement, and the 2030 Director for the North Carolina Division of Public Health. She holds a diploma in nursing from the Johnston Willis Hospital School of Nursing, a baccalaureate degree in nursing, and a master's degree in education from the University of Virginia. She received a PhD from East Carolina University with 5 decades in psychiatric mental health and nursing. She has held positions in academia and local and state governmental public health. Her research interests are population health and accountability. She credits strong mentorship over the years as the reason for her continued enjoyment of the work. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dale as she will be presenting the Healthy NC 2030 overview this afternoon.
I am going to assume now that Lindsay has given me a thumbs up to go ahead and get started. So thank you again, I think, for that introduction. And we're here this afternoon to talk about Healthy North Carolina 2030 and how it intersects with both results-based accountability, clear impact scorecard, and how we pull all of this together. So for about the next hour or so, we're going to try and answer some of those questions that you may have or may be thinking about, particularly as it relates to the work that we do every decade and around a set of indicators. So if you have not already obtained a copy of HNC 2030, I'm holding up a copy. We do have a limited number of copies available, but please feel free to use my email at the end to let me know if you do not have a hard copy and feel like it would benefit you in your work. It's certainly available online as well. So the big picture for today that I intend to cover is just this very broad overview of the subjects I just mentioned. Both Healthy North Carolina 2030 and that wonderful process that took about 18 months to complete. Dr. Bell is here, I see in the chat room, and he was one of the chair of that work, as well as to talk a fair amount about results-based accountability and how that, along with a tool called Clear Impact Scorecard, may help us to do the monitoring that's necessary as we, watch the work that we do in local communities and how it all contributes to the overall impact that we have statewide using these indicators. So let's begin with that big picture overview. How does HNC 2030 mesh with the work, particularly of local health departments and their partners and the Division of Public Health over the next decade? And this is a rather, complex slides. We'll stay here just for a minute and walk you through it. We'll be coming to parts of it over the next hour or so. But when you think about our collective work over the next decade, it really began with a process that was the state health assessment that started its work in 2018 and went through most of the year during 2019 and piggybacked with the process that we used to come up with the H&C 2030 indicators. The H&C 2030 indicator report was released last January at the Public Health Leaders Conference. And then shortly thereafter, we began working on the state health improvement process. And of course, you all know how our intended plans have been amended. And we are wrapping up the report for that now, and that will be released here in about another, I'd say, month to 6 weeks. And it incorporates Healthy North Carolina 2030 and uses the scorecard to be able to track our progress as we have these continued dialogues with our community about how we're doing on these indicators. So you see here on the right, just sort of a snapshot of what is meant by a scorecard. We're going to go on to the website later in the presentation and open that up and show you exactly what that tool looks like and how it's being done. So this whole process is actually going to take place between now and December of 2029. So to answer your question, just like local health departments that are involved in conducting community health assessments, the Division of Public Health conducted a state health assessment in 2019 that led to this publication of H&C 2030 indicators. And just like local health departments and their partners, community health improvement plans, or CHIPs, and the state SHIP will use these indicators as population measures for the next decade. DPH and local health departments will track their progress using Clear Impact Scorecard. So a question may pop up, well, okay, so how is H&C 2030 different from or similar to H&C 2020? We've been doing these decennial reports now. This is our 5th year, or almost 50 years of being involved with creating documents that are intended to guide our work for the next 10 years. So you see here a picture of that cover again of the H&C 2030 report. And NCIOM was our contracted agency that staffed the work. And the complete details of that are available online and inside the report. And I think you'll find it a very robust process, and we incorporated in that process RBA while we were developing those indicators. So the big difference between H&C 2020 and H&C 2030 is that we had a focus on health topics during H&C 2020. And they're the usual suspects that we're used to seeing in public health in particular. There are what we would call our big ticket items. So it was quite a switch and a little bit of a jolt when we shifted to the population health framework for H&C 2030 work. And H&C 2030, using a population health framework, caused us to view this work in terms of these drivers of health outcomes being both the quality of life and life expectancy. And it's based upon the county health rankings population health model that was developed with support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and primarily through folks associated with the University of Wisconsin. And this particular set of health behaviors, clinical care, socio and economic factors, and physical environment are believed to contribute a certain percentage to our overall health outcomes. And so we use that framework to guide us as we try to develop the indicators that we wanted to monitor our population health. Along the way, we also decided that it was extremely important not just to focus on the health disparity approach, which had primarily been used both in the 2010 and the 2020 Healthy North Carolina and Healthy People reports, but to extend that to the health equity lens. You know, we often say that you don't know that you have a disparity if you have no data about it, but you can certainly suspect that when you apply that health equity lens, and then you look for the data that can help inform your work. So if we were to apportion the indicators according to the relative contribution to overall health outcomes, and that would come up to about 20 or 21 indicators that NCIOM and the task force finally identified. So we have 6 indicators shown here in yellow that are about social and economic factors. We have 3 that are attributed to the physical environment. The ones that we ended up choosing were primarily those around the built environment and not the natural environment. And then there are 6 indicators specific to health behaviors. And we have 4 that are related to clinical care. And then 2 very important overarching indicators that were added to this mix. And they're shown here. And the page on the right is just one of the pages from the report itself, which provides additional detail. And of course, each indicator is discussed within the report in detail as well. So that's HNC 2030. HNC 2020 had 40 objectives. HNC 2030 has 21 indicators. And whereas 2020 had this focus on individual health topics, 2030 has a focus on health equity and the overall drivers of health. HNC 2030 follows the population health model, just like Healthy People 2030. So the next part of what I would like to talk about is, what is RBA, results-based accountability? Why are we using it? And for those of you who've been involved in community health assessment since, I guess, the last decade, at one time we were introducing SMART goals, and you may be wondering, well, why aren't SMART goals good enough for this work that we're trying to do? So I see that no one has indicated, I think in the chat box that I see, Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see anyone with a lot of experience in RBA or scorecard. So I will choose to make that an opportunity to give you a thumbnail sketch of the major concepts involved. But RBA is a disciplined way of thinking and acting to improve entrenched and complex social problems. And communities can use it to improve the lives of children, youth, and families. It's also used by organizations to improve the effectiveness of their programs. So you may say, but we're already pretty disciplined. But we'll show you how you can take disciplined thinking and maybe take it one step further and pair it with data and start viewing your program effectiveness and your population accountability slightly different. So words that describe RBA, data-driven, that it's transparent decision-making. And the ones I like best are that it's common sense, it's plain language, and you can get from talk to action or ends to means type thinking pretty quickly. So if you had to have just one takeaway from RBA and you couldn't remember the detail, this is an important slide. It talks about there are two kinds of accountability, and that's really, really important to grasp that. And so we'll spend a little time on that in a few minutes when we talk about results-based accountability. And there are three types of performance measures. And they're just the most wonderful performance measures anybody could ever want. Very easy to remember those. And then we associate about 5 core questions with what we call turn the curve thinking. So know that RBA is about accountability, a couple of different types, about performance measures, and there are 3 types of those, and something that's called turn the curve thinking. So we're going to go over those 3 aspects of RBA because that will be important for you to relate it to HNC 2030 and how we're going to be monitoring the work that's being done both at the state level and our partners and the local level and local partners. So we think of results-based accountability as having 2 types of accountability, one that deals with population accountability and one that deals with performance accountability or the performance of programs or agencies that serve people. And this is, I think, one of the most uplifting moments that I had when I finally understood that whatever program I happened to be working with or am working with at the time, I'm not responsible for making sure that everybody is healthy in the population that I'm serving. The population accountability is separate from our performance accountability as we contribute to the health of the population. And we'll give some examples of that in just a minute. So before we can talk about, turn the curve thinking and, where we start, RBA starts with the very first word that's in the title, results. A result is an end. And we're going to take a few seconds here to figure out what we mean by a result and how it's different than maybe we framed other things. Results are conditions of well-being for entire populations. You can't argue with results. Results are those things that we're just born knowing. They're good things, and we know intuitively that that's what we want for ourselves, for our families, and our communities. Even the people that fund us know that when we talk about results, that these are good things that we want to have happen. I would dare say in any other year, I would say that no sane person could argue with you, but I'll save that for another year. These are just the spoken truth. They are results. We're going to learn how to craft a few of those. So populations, when we talk about the health of a population, that can be a whole population or a subpopulation. So just to give you a few examples, that could be all the people or all children prenatal to 5 or all seniors or all people with developmental disabilities or African American males. But it's about a population. A geographic area is part of the results statement. So you can use RBA down at a neighborhood level. You can use it at the level of the country. So when you're talking about a result, you're talking about a population in a specific geographic area. And you can see that that can be at many different levels. Let me give you a few examples of tying that to a well-being statement to a population and a geographic area. All people of the United States are healthy. All North Carolina children enter school ready to learn. All seniors in Wake County thrive in safe neighborhoods. All people with developmental disabilities in Charlotte have equitable access to transportation. And African American males in Southeast Raleigh are economically secure. Those are all things that people would want for themselves, their families, or for their communities. So when you begin this process of using RBA, and again, as it relates to HNC 2030, we are talking about creating conditions of well-being in terms of a results statement. So when you develop this results statement, which is the population, the geographic area, and the condition of well-being, they're always positively stated. It's simple language. And you don't say, I want to increase the number of primary care providers in the community, because that's not a result. It's like saying, I'll settle for half enough is good enough. And nobody wants half when they can have all of it. So the result is not a measurement. It's a condition. It's what you want. And so we also, avoid referencing, specific types of services in those statements. So hang on to that for a minute, because I want to show you how a results statement is linked to an indicator, because that's the title of today's talk. It's about the HNC 2030 and those 21 indicators. So a bit about indicators. Indicators are measures that help quantify the achievement of a population result. This is a book of indicators, 21 of them. And they ought to be able to answer the question, how would we recognize a result in measurable terms if we fell over them? So for example, the rate of low birth weight babies helps quantify whether we're getting healthy births or not. It helps. Or third grade reading scores help quantify whether children are succeeding in school today and whether they were ready for school 3 years ago. So crime rate might help to quantify whether or not we are living in a safe community. It may not be the only indicator, but it is an indicator that might help us tell if we could recognize that result if we fell over it. Indicators, very, very important, concept, refer only to whole populations, not programs. And for anyone who's ever had to review community health assessments or write a community health assessment where you basically felt like you were trying to promise that you were going to solve, all the hunger or all the obesity in your community, from your work, you'll appreciate that your responsibility is to achieve the program performance measures, but you only contribute to the population measure, which in this case would be an indicator. So when you're selecting the headline indicators, and we went through this process very deliberately, again, with HNC 2030, we brought in an RBA person from Clear Impact, Deidre Epps. Many of you know her, who used to work for the software folks and is very good friends with Mark Friedman, who is the author of Trying Hard is Not Good Enough, which outlines the RBA principles. The criteria for selecting headline indicators: does the indicator communicate to a broad range of audiences, and is it easily understood? Most people understand, for example, what life expectancy is, or even infant mortality, rate. In terms of proxy power, does the indicator say something of central importance about the result? I love HNC 2030 in that when you're trying to talk about the health of moms and babies, for example, which is, the bread and butter of public health, we have 3 wonderful indicators. Arguably, all of them are related, but 3 wonderful ones that are good indicators that say something about maternal child health, and that's the teenage birth rate, early prenatal care, low birth weight babies, and of course, infant mortality. And we say that they travel together like a herd. So generally, if one is going in the right direction, others will follow, and vice versa. And the other one is data power. Does the indicator provide quality data on a timely basis? And this is where it's so tough. You know, infant life expectancy is a wonderful um, uh, indicator in that it's pretty easy to define, you know, the difference between, you know, living and not living. And it's a very, you know, finite point. But in order to see changes in time over life expectancy, it takes 5 to 10 years before we see things that move a great deal. So in that sense, you know, it depends on what you're trying to use it as a measure for, as to, you know, the strength of it. You know, some data is great, but it's not collected in our situation in the state at the county level. And that poses a problem. Or it's not collected every year, and that may be something that you need for the type of work that you do. All right, so we've talked about results and indicators, and we've talked about that in terms of accountability, being a population accountability. So now we're going to talk about that other type of accountability, program or performance accountability. And Mark Friedman gives us 3 questions that he has said all performance measures that have ever existed for any program in the history of the universe can be used by answering these 3 questions. So that's a bargain. Imagine yourself in the infamous elevator trying to talk to a commissioner, trying to advocate for, you know, some dollars for the work that you do. And if you can answer these questions in that 15 or 20 seconds, how much did you do? How well did you do it? And is anybody better off? That's what we mean. And so when we go back and we start talking about SMART goals and things like that, SMART goals at least have some definition to them, and they're quite good for what they're intended for. But when we start trying to measure performance accountability against population accountability, this becomes a little bit closer to being able to tell that story, and which is the next step we're going to with our turn the curve thinking. So let me give you an example in public health language. These 3 questions sort of speak to both the quantity of what we do and the quality of it. And it also speaks to those things that talk about how much effort we as the public health professionals put into it, as well as the effect that it actually has on the population, client population that we're trying to serve. So if I am writing a performance measure for, let's say I have a nutrition program that's called Healthy Food Choice Trainings. So I might report on the number of trainings that we did. And that's a very typical type of measure that we've seen since we started, you know, asking people to give us their criteria. What percentage of trainings are taught by registered dietitians may speak to how well that training was done. I use the example in my own work with local health departments that we're training to do this. You know, it may be, I'm sure this has never happened to you, that your dietitian went out on maternity leave and was doing all kinds of trainings, and during that time you had other people step in to help. Well, in this particular situation, suppose you had a health occupation student, you know, from the local, you know, high school step in and actually, you know, deliver that content. Great experience for the health occupation student, but perhaps in your feedback, some of the participants felt like they didn't get all that they wanted. So, you know, sometimes it just, the percentage of trainings that are taught by registered speaks to the quality of that work that you're doing. So the next level, and perhaps the one that is hardest for us to capture, but tells us the effect, we also express in measurements that are number and percentage. How many participants in the training demonstrated the ability to plan 1 week of healthy choice menus for their family at the conclusion of their course participation. That would be a reasonable expectation, is to be able to, just do a menu, a grocery list for the family for a week. So maybe they could do it at the end of the training. But if you wanted to look at the percentage of those participants that at 3 months, and since none of us ever do anything exactly the way we were taught or intended, it would be reasonable to think that you had success if at least half of those participants, or 50% of those, participants, reported planning menus, 6 out of the 12 weeks during that 3. That would be a measurement that I would find quite successful. So this is what we mean by performance measures. How much did you do? How well did you do it? And is anybody better off? And you express that as numbers and percentages. Okay, so here's the deep dive. Depending on the book or whether or not you use the scorecard, and I'm going to use a simpler version today called Turn the Curve Thinking. Turn the curve thinking is how you look at the data that you have and you talk with your community members. And that's what we call implementing HNC 2030 using RBA and using turn the curve thinking. It's not so different from what our community health assessment coordinators are already doing in the community, but it's a little more disciplined than perhaps we've approached it in the past. So let's look at this, these 5 core questions. When we talk about how we are doing, which is the first question, we're really talking about the ends that we want, and we've just got through talking about that. Ends means the result. How are we doing in relation to the indicator that we chose to tell us whether or not how we were doing? So the first turn the curve question is, you're talking about unemployment. You want to, with your community, your partners that are involved in this work, talk about unemployment and look at the unemployment for your county, your footprint, if you are doing it for a region or at the state. And you discuss in detail doing a root cause analysis of what's contributing to make you do better or not so well. You start writing this story behind the curve, and as you're doing that, you identify the partners who have a role to play in turning the curve. So it's not always just who's at the table already, it's who else needs to be at the table to help you do that work. And then you're going out to look at those things that others have done and identify them. Not that you're going to do all of them, but you need to at least know what's out there that seems to have worked for other folks, or is worth at least trying it in your community. And then from there, you develop your action plan that turns the curve. Those are the means. And this becomes, if you're using scorecard or perhaps another environment, a very transparent process that puts that story behind the curve likely. Now, unfortunately, the way most of us doer bees like to do is that we like to just sort of jump in right where the action plan is. Somebody gives us some money, we know we've got a big problem, and we just implement that without going through the steps. And it's quite a developmental process and should not be skipped. So going back to turn the curve thinking, you have to have some, baseline data. This will help to inform us in a few minutes about why we are suggesting that scorecard may be a good vehicle for doing this work. So you need to know the history of, if you're talking about unemployment, what does unemployment look like? Well, this up until, March, this could have been the story of unemployment. It was going down in our state and in many communities for the whole population, not necessarily for our marginalized populations. And then we forecast and turn the curve thinking, if we don't do anything, will it continue to go down? Or perhaps you forecasted in March, well, this is bad. We know right now that less than 4% unemployment is not going to stay with us very long. And of course it hasn't. And if we're trending in the wrong direction, then we have an opportunity to do some things to turn the curve. Or maybe even if you're going in the right direction, maybe it's an opportunity to do more of the right things to get you there faster. You ask yourself, are we okay if we don't do anything? If you're not okay, then you implement those programs. That's where the turn the curve comes in. And in business language, we would call that your return on investment. So again, when you're meeting with these people, it almost becomes an agenda. You could pass out whenever you have a community meeting with your partners. This could be the process that we're going through right now, is to say, well, we're going to start with the result that we want and the indicators that we're using to measure the result that we want. And we'll go through this. What are the restricting and contributing factors, the positive, negatives, internal, external? The current situation and what we anticipate, we're right in the throes of doing this right now. After you do all of that, you have to settle on prioritizing those root causes that you think that you need to work with. And that allows you to develop the strategies that lead to the action plans. So in the partners, if anyone in this room who does any sort of community work has not had this experience, you've got some people who always show up, and you've got other people you're always trying to get to the table. And so we're always looking for ways to expand the work, because the Affordable Care Act actually attempted to expand the work by requiring, charitable hospitals to do community health needs assessments. But the truth is, many of our hospitals were already engaged in North Carolina with that, with health and other groups. So it wasn't a new concept, but it certainly caused some attention, and still does, to create, some energy or excitement around that. But if you take all of the nonprofits, and if you take all of the governmental public health partners, and if you take all of the healthcare partners and put them all together, even that very strong multi-sectoral approach is not enough to address these complex problems. It's a start. It's what we have. It's what we work with. But we absolutely need to have the buy-in of our business community. And so how do you make that happen? So you start with who you have. One of my strategies is ask the people that you have at the table at the next meeting that you have, tell them to bring one other person, preferably not an agency head, like bring a real person. It could be a neighbor, maybe a relative, but just somebody with a different perspective than the usual people who are at that, and encourage them and teach them how their voice is as important. You can easily double your number of people that come to your meetings by that one action alone. Okay, now you see the icons on the right on this slide, the R and the I. You already know that that's results and indicators, and you may have guessed that the P is for program or performance, and PM is a performance measure. So as we begin wrapping up this discussion about what RBA is, so that we can get into how we're going to use scorecard for the HNC 2030 indicators, there are really two sections that we're monitoring. We're monitoring the population indicator. And again, particularly these 21 for the next decade that deal with conditions of well-being, children born healthy, safe communities, clean environments, those sorts of things. With indicators, rate of low birth weight babies, crime rate, air quality, and unemployment, whatever it is, we use those two together, but distinctly different. We use performance accountability to talk about the work of programs. And we talk about them very simply, how much did you do? How well did you do it? And is anybody better off, the customer? So that gives everybody who's at the table, who's trying to contribute to the population outcome or result, an opportunity to define what success looks like within their own program. So an even simpler version, you start with results and the indicator. You apply, you turn the curve thinking, you come up with the strategies that you're going to use. And that's, frequently based upon, your resources and the feasibility of doing that, and also the values of the organizations that are going to be your partners that are going to be involved in the work. And that is one turn the curve. When you have started implementing your action plan using programs, interventions, those things, and you have your performance measures, you come back and you revisit those performance measures, and you do the same sort of turn the curve thinking, well, how are we doing on that? Did we achieve what we wanted to achieve? Do we need to do it differently? Do we need to have a different strategy? So it's like a CQI process. And it starts with the assumption that you're not going to just finish this in 1, 2, or 3 years. So here's a little test. And for those of you who are brave and in the chat box, I want you to look at this slide. And again, you've had a very watered down version of RBA, but I think that most of you could get this. I'm going to ask you to look at these, pretty colored boxes and ovals. And I will tell you that one of these things that you see in the boxes is a result statement. And one of these things is an indicator. And the other 6 things are performance measures. So for the sake of time, I'm going to ask you, some brave soul, if you would please write in there the start of what you think to be the result statement. Remember, it's a population, a geographic area, and a condition of well-being. Patty Kempton, first out of the box, says the dark blue box. Absolutely, Patty. Residents of Charlotte are economically secure with jobs that can support the needs of families. Woohoo! Oh, Anna, great. She's already got the second question, which is, which one is the indicator? Perfect. City unemployment rate. So imagine this to be, I'll just pick on Charlotte. This is these performance measures that are here are actually performance measures that might belong to a job. That's okay, Anna. Had a job training program, okay? And remember, the performance measures are how much did you do, how well did you do it, and is anybody better off? Well, this is perfect because it gives us, I want to fund this group if the numbers and the percentages look that way. I imagine that in their assessment, they felt that the economy was not where it needed to be. And so they started with the result that they run their economy to make sure that people in Charlotte were economically secure and that they had jobs that would support their families. Isn't that what we all want? So one of the indicators that they thought that might help tell that story would be the city unemployment rate. There could be others, but this is the one they chose. That's a good one. So they have, one of their approaches was they've got a job training program. Well, is it a good job training program, or is it a not so good job training program? So this, these boxes, these sort of stair step ones, the number of people trained, that's how much did you do? You don't want to have a trainer that doesn't know how to get people jobs. So there's perhaps a certification attached to, being a job trainer. So the percentage of trainers that they have in this job training program that are certified to do that work, that's how well are you going to do this job, training program. Now, if the trainees master new job skill, the percentage of them is your performance measure. That's That's an effect that it has, because that's what you want. You want trainees with new job skills. That's one. They've got a second one, the number of them to get employed. We've got a third one, which is even better. The number of trainees that are employed at a new skill level. And obviously, the sustainable one of the percent of trainees employed at a new skill level for more than 1 year. That would tell me, if I were in that elevator with that, program director, you're doing a good job and you're not going to have any trouble when you're coming up before the budget tonight. So this is a quick snapshot of RBA as we're going to be applying it to these very high level complex problems that we could be wringing our hands about for the next 10 years. We're going to be aware of them at the population level, acknowledge them, somewhat try to understand the dynamics involved and why those indicators look the way they do. But we're going to come back at it with strategies or programs at the level where we work. And then we're going to not only choose to do the right things, which is what the result indicator turn the curve thinking does. They help you choose the right things to do. The performance measures and turn the curve thinking talk to you about doing the right things well. And it takes both of those things. Choose the right things and do the right things well. All too often, we do a lot of things well, but they have nothing to do with being the right things. Okay, back to the question we asked, what is RBA, why use it, and why not SMART goals? It's a disciplined way of thinking and acting. It gets from talk to action quickly and to achieve results by focusing on data and dialogue. It uses plain language. How much, how well, better off. It has 2 levels of accountability, population and program, and goals do not equal results. Okay. I promise I'll give you time to ask questions, should you have many. So we're getting real close to the fun part where I get to show you scorecard. So what is scorecard? And if there's anybody in here with some fiscal responsibility, how much does it cost? Is it mandatory? And how does it improve transparency? That's what we're going to try and look at now. So here's just a screenshot from the HNC 2030 scorecard that I and others have now started. And we'll go visit that on the website in just a minute. And it's in its collapsed version right now. So you'll see HNC 2030, and remember that population health framework that showed you way back at the beginning, the social and economic factors, physical, health behaviors, and clinical care, all tying in to that. Okay, so here's the part where I hope that technology works for me. And with any luck at all, I will sign on here. Okay, is everyone with me? Can you, knowing I can't hear you and I know I can't see you. Am I sharing? Apologize for the technology confusion on my end. You can see the login page. Can you see not the login page, but the live page?
No. I don't know if.
Thanks, Susan.
Okay. So all we see is the login page. I dropped a link.
And now? All right, Lindsay, let me ask you, would you, I think I gave you, you see the login information there. Could I ask you to pull that up? Okay, are you seeing it now? Thank you for bearing with me. I know we will resolve it here shortly. All right, if you, I think just a minute. And what about now? It should be sharing at this point in time. I'll have to go to my, okay. I'm going to share my login credentials with you, Lindsay, in email.
Thank you everyone for being patient as we work on this.
Okay. Thank you all. Lindsay should be able to pull that up here in just a second. So Clear Impact is a scorecard that that is based on Mark Friedman's work. Trying hard is not good enough. And if she will maximize the screen so that we can see that, I would appreciate it. So this is just looking at a home page, and right now I would like Lindsay to go over to the far left and be able to see the item that's called scorecard objects. Just open that, and then you see scorecards. That would be great. Now I have several different scorecards started in here, so we're just going to look at the one that is HNC 2030 scorecard. Just click that on or view. Be fine. Okay, and then we want to be able to open it up all the way. So if you go all the way to the top, okay, and you see that bar, there's a sliding bar on the right at the top of the screen. Make sure that's pulled all the way over. Okay, and then you can start scrolling down. I have one piece of the unemployment rates we're updating right now, so I don't have a showing in there. And then you can see as you scroll down here, these are the 21 indicators where you see results, and then you see the indicator that's associated with that result and the story behind the curve. We're going to go down just a little bit more because all 21 indicators are in here. I want to stop maybe when we get down to the next one. When we look at the, let's say, physical environment, okay? And then let's click on the result that we see that's associated. It's the all North Carolina residents have equitable access to exercise opportunities. At the end of that line, there's a little gray box that means it's a note field, and it says why this particular result is important. And this particular language comes directly out or close to it of HNC 2030. And that's where we see that viewed. Now, if you can go back to your scorecard objects, you can go back over to scorecard. Yeah, that's fine. All right, and you can scroll on down. You'll see on the far right, this is a collapsed version of scorecard where it gives you that quick visual to know, where you're going and whether or not that's the right direction or not. You get more detail when you open it up. So within scorecard itself, you have the opportunity to add these things like we learned about a few minutes ago, turn the curve thinking, that tells you, what this thing is, what program it is, who are your partners, and it lets you see the performance measures. So this one is an HNC 2030 scorecard. It's one that a local health department can link to and be able to tell their story by showing the state level data in relation to their local level data. All right, so let's go back over to scorecard objects. Again, I want to show you another scorecard. Open up, that'd be great. And let's look at this one that's called the Chip Soch accountability. So the reason that we're really doing RBA is because 6 years ago, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I had an interest in trying to work with community health assessments. And I looked back at the 20 years worth of community health assessments and improvement plans in Soch's and determined through research, a couple of research projects, that I thought that we could do better at being able to tell our successes than just using the Soch reports alone, because we really had not very good results being reported in the Soch. And that's due to probably a lot of incontinuity, between people. It's done over time and years, and people come and go. So let's just open up this scorecard a little bit, and it kind of helps to take a very simple application of these RBA principles, where I said really what I would want for our program at the state level is for our community health improvement plans to be able to use RBA and tell the story pretty clearly about how we contribute to the population, but more importantly, about our performance measures and the impact that our programs have on people, not just how hard we work. And so you open up each of these things. I give the background about who are the partners that are involved in trying to launch this whole HNC 2030 work for the next decade with RBA. We looked at the things. You can keep scrolling down. This is all, there's a story behind the curve of if we didn't do anything differently, why we would be sort of flatlining it. And it gives some of the research data that's behind all of that. We can keep scrolling down. As much as I love my research, I don't want to burden you with that. But it comes back down to our program performance for what we are doing. And so the program being, in this case, I work for DPH, and my performance measures, I've actually cut down a few of them here because, you can measure a lot of things, but you don't have to track everything in order to figure out if you're going in the right direction and doing good work. So in this case, I said, based upon the strategies that were derived from the community health assessment research, we needed to start implementing this program statewide, building on the work that started out in the Western North Carolina group, and take it to the Eastern group and then to all points to make it voluntary for people to participate. So we started doing lots of these trainings, which is how much you're going to do. You can keep scrolling down, how well we're going to do it. We didn't have anybody certified in results-based accountability. And so I've been paying for people to be certified. We have some wonderful community health assessment people, coordinators who have or in the process of becoming certified, as I myself have been. And then so we want to make sure that we start from having nobody certified to everybody that's teaching this to folks is certified. Keep scrolling down, please. And then we also are looking at some of the other performance. Ultimately, for me, and when I will retire, I promise I will retire, when we've gotten back that $1 million that we lost from the General Assembly. So, in terms of are we any better off as a result of doing this, is because we do such a great job in order to tell this story about the work with HNC 2030s that we'll talk even the most conservative legislators into giving us back that $1 million that they cut from us in 2012. So going back up to our scorecard objects one more time, and if you would click on scorecards, you'll see, if you are a local health department person, you'll see something that's called HNC 2030 Scorecard Instructions for Local Health Departments. So if you're a local health department trying to do a community health improvement plan, using these 21 indicators, this is a template basically that tells you how to put your paper plan into scorecard to tell that story. So we're doing all kinds of trainings right now where we're giving people access. Let me just show you who has access already that we've started. Lindsay, thank you so much for going over. If you see where my name is in the black bar on the top, if you would scroll over to the next tab and scroll down and just pull that drop down. These are all the counties that have what we call instances already created, and we're already working with staff to be able to move their work from their current paper version of their community health improvement plan to this virtual version that they can put on their website if they choose to, or keep it internal if they choose not. And they can share indicators and resources across the group, telling this story of how we're improving the health of North Carolina's in HNC 2030. All right, girl, that's great. I'm going to stop there and let you stop sharing, and I'm going to go back to finishing up the presentation. And so we'll have about 15 minutes for questions, hopefully. Let's see if we can get back to it. Lindsay, could I ask you to advance the slides from that login screen? Thank you. All right, so next slide, please. Next slide. There you go. So if you go back one slide, please. So to answer your question about scorecard, thank you, Lindsay. It's a web-based software for measuring and improving public sector performance and impact. It's free for North Carolina local health departments and hospitals that are working on CHAs and CHNAs and are using these HNC 2030 indicators. It's voluntary. You can see, however, that we expect to have about 70 health departments using it by the end of this year. And transparency results when you share what you know about what you want to achieve and how you're doing on a few key indicators. And you reveal that thinking and strategic planning behind choosing the right things to do and then doing those things well. Next slide, thank you. So today we did move from talk to action by just introducing these basic concepts behind RBA and how we're going to incorporate the HNC 2030s into state and local community health improvement plans. And then in the next decade ahead, we'll explore how to make sure that we're doing the right things and we're doing those things well. Okay. And so if you don't have a copy of Trying Hard is Not Good Enough and it's you're involved in this work, please let me know by email, or if you do need to have a copy of this, you can't, particularly working in the virtual environment, be asked to share copies. We do have a limited number. I'll try and get you what you need. Next slide, please. And then I also want you to know that available this fall, and I speak to this because I see Candace join the room. If she's still here, I promise you, Candace, the print versions of these will be coming soon. We have both the 2019 companion document to the HNC 2030, the State Health Assessment, and the one that will be released here in within the next 6 to 8 weeks, the State Health Improvement Plan 2020. And you have my contact information there. These will also be on our website, which is also listed at the bottom of this slide. And these slides will be posted on, I think, Susan's website at some point in time. If not, please feel free to send me an email. Next slide, please. There's some references to support some of the work that's been done here today. And next slide. And so I think that, whoops, sorry, that shouldn't have been there. Next one, please.
All right.
You know that after 5 today, after attending the 4 hours of these, or in the future, if you do the recorded session, you can scan this in order to complete your evaluation and earn your contact hours. It has been my pleasure. I am open to any questions in the remaining time. Please let me know if you have some, or if I've completely stimulated you with too much information. I certainly understand. And thank you to Anna and Patty for answering the questions. Well, this allows you to get out a couple of minutes early. I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is a great, great opportunity to be with so many of you today. And I look forward to the rest of the conference with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dale, for joining us today. I'm amazed at
Yes, I will.
I'm amazed at how much work you've put into this. I'm sorry you can't hear me, but thank you so much. Just a little shout out to our group here.
Here's my email address.
There is a pin at the top of this bar with
and my mobile phone number.
The instructions for the survey.
Hey, Jane. Thank you all.
Just as if you are still with us, the instructions for getting your continuing education is at the top of it's the pinned message to the top of this chat. The survey, the evaluation survey will not open until 5 p.m. today. You will need to attend all 4 of the sessions provided by the nursing section of the NCPHA to receive any professional development contact hours. Our next scheduled session is at 3:15. If you're not able to attend these live, The recordings will be made available on the 12th. And you can watch them that way and continue to get your professional development. Contact hours. The survey will need to be completed no later than November 1st. So a short window of time, but I know you can do it.